So, I haven't done a video in a while, so I wanted to actually cover the most recent patch that we're about to be having in the mid-season patch, which is the patch 3.2.1. And this patch, after reading through it, it could be said to be how much shooters are really favored in the favored by the developers. But before we actually show how badly they are favored by the developers, let's go over all the contents of this patch note analysis. So I will be covering over the special changes first, because they are more the ones that introduce us to the rest of the changes that we'll be covering through, such as the sub-weapon changes, ability changes, then to the weapon changes, then to other changes, which will be containing small nitpicks and stuff that are more notable for the minor changes that they did, like from bug fixes and such. And from these patch notes, I want to make a reminder that there was a word used sometimes, which is the word negate, which does not mean that it's going to be completely removing the effect of a ability or another effect. It only means that it's going to be reduced, unless it specifically says that it completely negates it. You want to be remembering that. So, on top of that, I will also be having all the buffs and nerfs color-coded, and there will also be the neutral changes will be more often like white, to display that which changes are good and which changes are more subjective changes. So, we first start off from the special changes, and to cover the elephant in the room, first, it's the crab tank. Crab tank is the one that people really wanted to get nerfed very early because of one particular weapon that people just did not like. And we did get it now, which is that its overall duration has been nerfed from 9 seconds to 8 seconds, which is not a huge change, really. 9 seconds to 8 seconds is kind of a short slap on the wrist when you actually think about it. And then there's the other changes included into it, is that special power-up has a increased extension rate, which probably means that we're going to be having a stronger effect at lower special power-up amounts. So we might be getting to the same 9-second value at just about two subs of special power-up, which is going to be a massive change. Is that the only thing that is going to cover most of these crab tank weapons is that you use special power-up. And the most prominent weapon right now is Splash, which can take advantage of that. And it's not going to be 2-starred because it already uses a good amount of abilities, and it can remove some of those for it. So yeah, I really hope that they could have actually increased or reduced the duration more than 9 seconds, because 8 seconds is still very long. And even then, if special power-up does not turn out to be that strong with small amounts, it still means that 8 seconds is a long duration, and this is probably going to be lingering around for a very long time. Then we get the rather good small buff, which is the tactical alert buff, is that now quick respawn and special saver are no longer affected by the abilities such as respawn punisher and haunt, those that negate its effect by basically reducing them. But there's still the static reduction that is incorporated to respawn punisher and haunt, which will still affect it, which is mainly just like a 0.5 second or so, something like that. I think this is a good change, that now tactical can have a small amount of viability, but I don't think it's still going to be enough to raise its viability, because the crab tank nerf was not strong enough. So we might not end up actually seeing tactical still either, because it still is not strong enough. Even after this buff, this is just to affect mostly respawn punisher weapons, which is only E-leader. There's nothing else that actually gets affected by this. There's no other weapons in the current meta that would benefit from this. So it's a very minor buff that does not change too much. So the other special changes are rather impactful too, which is that now Race Slider has a 28 of a 60 of a second of invulnerability before you're able to move. which I have a typo there, but it doesn't matter. There's this is a good change. Now what it means is that like you can reslider and not get punished immediately after the explosion, which means that only after you start moving you can get punished. So weapons like Tetris can be a little bit more viable, but I don't think like some other weapons are going to be too big of a viability. But this is definitely going to make Tetris into a better weapon overall, but it's not going to make it absolutely insane. At least it's going to make Reslider into a slightly better special that it's not completely dog shit, which it basically was in the recent patches. Another interesting change that I want to actually cover a little bit more extensively is that like they increased the area damaged by about 10% and increased the damage by 50% on a triple ink strike. This might be a possible, and this needs to be more often tested right after the patch hits. That like there's an interesting quirk about triple ink strike that it can stick into objectives and I think crab tanks too. So if it can stick into crab tanks might not be able to escape the triple ink strike as consistently, if not at all, which means that it might be a slight counter to them. Because if you're able to then stick the triple ink strike onto them, that means they are able to then just get, well, damaged a lot more consistently, and they might not be able to survive all those triple ink strikes. But some of the triple ink strike weapons are kind of bad, but at least we have like 2 triple ink strike weapons that are good, which is just regular Slosher and the Tentatek, which are decent. We might see them a little bit more frequently, but there's another reason why we might be seeing them frequently, which we'll be getting on to. Then, onto the sub-weapon changes, there's only one. Angle Shooter's damage has been increased from 30 to 35, and its painting when striking Terran and opponents is doubled. This change is as good as like you could almost just ignore this change, because there's only one weapon that currently benefits the most from this, which is Slosher Deco, which is able to combo from the 35 damage to its own slosh more consistently now, because it's not going to get affected by like sub resistance up that most only carry like 1 sub or 2 subs, and you still need more than 2 subs to negate some of this effect. So it's a good change, but all the other weapons that like Jet Squelcher, Pro, all of those kinds of weapons are still going to be feeling like shit because they have this particular thing onto them. So it's going to feel like shit. So unfortunately those weapons will be staying in the dumpster. Except that one, which may be decent, but we'll see. This is like, now we go to the ability change. This particular ability change was confusing to a lot of people because they thought this was actually a nerf that this weapon in particular reduced or impacted this weapon. So I'm going to be explaining how this ability worked in general. So it has the static swim speed reduction of 10%, and how it worked on early Splatoon 3 and of course in Splatoon 2 is that it also had that it reduced swim speed up ability by about 10% or the 20% in Splatoon 2, which meant that you had to stack a lot more than intended in order to increase its effect a lot more. But now with this new change is that it's only going to have the static swim speed reduction and no longer has the negating effect of the swim speed up ability. And this is the big buff of it. But however, while we have this buff into the Ninja Squid ability, there's still going to be the nerf that now there is going to be a splash when you exit the like swim form into get form. I think this is overall a neutral change because now you're going to be able to have more swim speed again while having Ninja Squid. So overall this feels actually a decent change that now you can afford to use more space for just having like other abilities instead of just having swim speed up, which I didn't personally like, and I did not commonly use Ninja Squid despite it being good on the meta. The swim speed reduction is overall just very annoying to deal with. But now it's gonna be like a little bit better, despite the other nerf to its like the exiting thing. It's gonna make combat feel a little bit better because now people aren't gonna be able to just make it feel like kind of miserable when they just exit the entire form. So now it's gonna be feeling a little bit better. So there might be some changes to how people might be using Ninja Squid. That there's going to be maybe splashes or maybe some other weapons will be using less of Ninja Squid because they don't like the exiting the thing. But it might be increasing in the amount of like Ninja Squid usage because of the buff to the overall swim speed. But still, it is. I recommend because of the somewhat confusing explanation of how it works that players look through it, that how it functions, and if this like change that how it functions is the correct one, this should be the correct one. That how it functions, and they can still test it that this is how it's intended to be before we make any further conclusions. If the intended function is that Ninja Squid now like does not get increased, but which I doubt. Like this current new version is how it's supposed to be. I still recommend people to test this out because that's how it's intended to be. Now we move on to the weapon changes. I want to emphasize that this will be going through like the small changes first, or small to decent changes, and then to the big changes. And right at first, we have Aerospray MG-RG, which is the size of Terran inked by falling spray has been increased by about 10%. I don't understand like why they decided to buff this weapon by 10%, because this weapon is solely for like turf war. Nobody uses this on ranked. Even after the buff, nobody's gonna use this. Maybe MG memes to counter like Crab with the Reef Slider buffs, but I don't think this is gonna be that viable of a strategy to do it. It still feels like shit still. Because like, they're with a bad weapon for combat itself. It's just gonna be like special spamming, that's it. Then we get the Jet Squelcher. They increased its accuracy on land by 17%. It's a decent change. I don't think the weapon itself is going to be seeing too much play either. There's better weapons to be using than it. But it's a decent change. Splattershot Nova got two rather decent changes. They increased its ink coverage by 19% and reduced its special cost to not 190. How it used to be is that you could still spam the special that shot like Nova had, but the main issue about the weapon was that like you could literally not paint at all. You had no way to contest even with its like painting capability. Every single other weapon like splashes, all kind of even regular splatter shots could paint over it because it has such a terrible painting. But this makes it better. However, there's a big but on this case. That, like, it's still a terrible weapon for combat. What you heavily rely on getting it special. You heavily rely on getting your whale to pressure the opponent, getting your teammates in, getting those pushes up. It sucks so bad at hitting enemies. It has an absolutely horrible damage that makes you feel absolutely miserable consistently for missing. This weapon is just not meant for combat, and even with these changes, people will likely not want to use it. They will try out how much you can actually spam the whale now, but I doubt people will want to keep using this because it's gonna feel miserable to hit anything. It's not gonna be dog shit anymore because I believe that it can get like 1 to 2 more whales than before, maybe even 3 more whales, but I don't think that's enough to make it even feel decent enough because as a main weapon, it's dog shit to hit people with. But anyway, enough about Nova. There's the Dynamo Roller with its buffs to increase its damage consistency, like the damage rate. And this feels nice, but again, I would like to remind that it's with a bad kit. It's not gonna see play until we get the next kit, unfortunately. Dynamo Roller does not like Tacticaler. Tacticaler is not good in this meta, and it will likely not be good in a later meta, unless Tacticaler gets buffed. And then we get the net buff that they increase the standing swing, or the horizontal swing, slashes, whatever you say, from 30 to 35, or 30 to 50. Actually, this is like, this is actually wrong. This is supposed to be 30 to 35 and not 50 for Big Swig. I have misplaced that, so you should be not noticing that, like, okay. That I should be fixing that later, but I'm too lazy to fix that. But you should be noting that it's 30 to 35. Even with if this were to be 50, or like if it was 50, then it might be this. But it's 35, so I should be fixing that error. But either way, 35 is not a good number. 35 is a very, very, very poor number still. The weapon itself sucks to actually fight with. You're gonna get like you're only needing like 3 instead of 4 swings. But that's still way too many swings to kill someone. It's gonna feel shit to do those swings. So just don't even try to play this weapon still. Just ignore playing this weapon for now. It stays in its dumpster that it belonged in. Play it for the beams, but don't keep playing it to throw matches. Just don't. Anyway, moving on. Blood Booster getting this kind of an ink consumption buff is pretty good. Like it had a ink consumption nerf in Splatoon 2, and then it just didn't get buffed in when going to Splatoon 3, so it kind of felt like shit, especially when not having main power up. So now we get to spam a little bit more shots, and isn't as reliant on Ink Saber main to function well. So this feels like a pretty decent change. So now you can maybe like drop in and use special charge up, but I don't think this is gonna boost its usage because it's still like main power up is the thing that makes this weapon. It's gonna feel a little bit better, but I don't think this is gonna be enough. So to the next changes we have mostly just special changes, but there's still one more change, which is that Nautilus has its firing duration increased by 15%. It's a nice change, even though it has a very poor kit. This is a good change for the future, that if it does get a good kit next time, this is going to be a huge change to it. That it has a lot more viability going later. But currently it's not able to be played consistently or at all really. It's the meta is still too special reliant, sub reliant, all that kind of stuff. That it's not going to be functioning too well in this current meta. Especially how Inkstorm is just a very poor special in the current meta anyway. It's just a very lackluster kit. Even though it's a very good main, the kit is not good enough. So there's a huge amount of these weapons getting their specials buffed. Splattershot 52, 96, Splattershot Pro, Splat Duelist. All of these got their specials changed by 10 points. But most of these weapons already did not really get played because of Splash. And while you might be seeing that, okay, now we can maybe think about using all of these weapons because of their special rates are a little bit better, and we'll be getting into that, why this change is not as impactful as you think it is, but we'll get that in a bit. So even then, like, Splat Duelist got its Scrap Tank nerfed a little bit, that even then the 190p buff and the Splattershot Pro having the 180p buff is pretty nice to compensate for them getting the nerf. And then there's the custom Splattershot Junior that maybe the developers apparently noticed that like it was a little bit of an annoying one, and then Splattershot Splatana Viper also got nerfed too to 190p. Is that maybe they noticed that like they were getting their specials a little bit too often, or maybe that they were both torpedo weapons that they noticed that they needed a little bit of a nerf that they weren't too annoying. We will still be somewhat seeing custom Splatoon Junior. I don't think we might be seeing too big of a need for this weapon because I don't think like it has any fruits. It has something. It's very annoying to play against Spider-Shot Junior, like custom Spider-Shot Junior, but I don't think it has the consistency when fighting like against really good players, teams, all those comps. But yeah, there's now the next change, or well, the next weapon that I want to mention. Splash-O-Matic. No changes. The weapon was left completely unchanged. The only nerf that it got was to its crab. And that crab is as good as like a slap on the wrist. This change is as so strange because like this weapon is currently one of, if not the best weapon in the game. Or it is actually the best weapon in the game currently because it controls the meta so well. And most of these changes don't even show to make enough of an impact to Splash-O-Matic because it's so oppressive. It has a kit that is so strong. It paints, it fights well, it can spam its special, it can spam its sub, it can do everything incredibly well. On this weapon not getting any changes is going to be meaning that most of these other weapons, like all these special changes that you see here, they are as good as meaningless. Like most of these other changes too. I don't think anything from them is going to be as meaningful to make a difference to the meta change. There's some of these like special changes, like the earlier Tri-Strike mentions. That's like the only small impactful change. But I don't think it's impactful enough because Splash-O-Matic is still going to be played. Double splashes is still going to be frequent. But what might impact this to an cataclysmic level is just going to be the next change. Slushing Machine got hit hard. Slushing Machine's ink consumption was increased by 10%. Its special cost got increased from 210 to 220. Dear God. This weapon was basically one of the main answers against Splash-O-Matic because as a weapon it kind of felt like shit to still sometimes play against Splash because it could kind of win against fights against it, but now it's going to have that less consistency as it can't keep up in fights for like as long because now it has to rely more on Inksaber main. And now it also can't get its special as frequently because now you're more gear dependent in order to get your special out more consistently and more frequently out. It's a very big change that is going to be affecting its consistency heavily. And people might even be not playing this because the ink consumption nerf is too much and the special cost nerf is also too much. The weapon might as well just not get used at all because the changes are too heavy on it. So what we might be seeing is like triple splash comps might be the norm, or even just the third slot for the overall weapon is just going to get changed into something else that maybe has a little bit of a better time against Crab or just doing better against it. Like maybe V-Shot, maybe T-Tech, maybe those kinds of weapons. But we can see that this is the earlier mentioned part about how they have a very big favoritism against, or yeah, they favor incredibly high onto the like shooters. Shooters are currently the best class still. After all these years, they're still the best class, and they still keep favoring them. They haven't really buffed most of the other classes. They are very, very afraid of actually nerfing shooters and making all these other niche weapon classes feel a little bit better or feel a little bit more consistent. There weren't any kind of buffs to like try or any of these other classes. They just keep buffing or nerfing all of the shooters. Like they hardly even nerfed shooters at all. There were a few like spray shooters, like Custom Splattershot Junior is one that got a nerf, and there weren't really many other changes to shooters. This is mostly it. And what this change does is that like the sloshing machine might even just completely fall out of the meta. It might just be a niche then instead of like being a good weapon. It still is a good weapon, but the ink consumption nerf might be too much for it. Because like being able to get your special out consistently with this weapon is what really impacts it. So it's kind of sad that this weapon is just gonna get gutted completely. And with this change, Splash-O-Matic will be more frequent. This still keeps Splash-O-Matic frequent in the meta. It's not gonna be going out at all. Yeah, a little bit of doomerism, but to end out the rest of the changes that they also introduced is that ink blot, left side wall climb fixed. That was near the mushroom, that was also fixed. Apparently there was a wall climb fix, that some of the walls were unintended to be climbable. There was also the ELTail big swig lag, which was fixed. And apparently a big notable is that they also apparently put some latency fixes and also some other fixes to Brella. While these changes seem pretty nice overall, or like these are like small changes, I don't think like Brella is going to be as consistent or like used in the meta, because the regular Brella, its kit is shit still. It's worse than just going for regular slosher or just like T-Tech now. They completely invalidated. And Rapid is also the other one that is like a big niche that is still better than it. Even with these latency changes or like fixes, it's still not enough. And Tent is also another weapon. It's just going to be really bad to still play because in fact it's kind of underwhelming. And it was never good in the first place anyway. So, to close this out, we're basically going to be seeing this very same kind of meta. Machine will very likely end up being dead. Shot, T-Tech, some kind of like people will be playing more of these weapons, but that's mostly it. This is just kind of like a patch that just did not impact enough of the current meta, which is the incredibly rough splash crab meta. And it's just going to be the same for the rest of the like 1.5 months. I really hope that the developers take note of this and include some nerf to Splash. I don't think it was enough to just leave it untouched, because now it just seems that like they favor shooters a little bit too much. Kind of a repeated point, but that's how it is. That's how they have been for the most recent patches, so I have to note about that. So, that's mostly it for this time. So, thank you for listening to this video, and I hope I see you another time.